next, but there's still this idea in evangelicalism that you got to protect that belief from getting infected by the world. And so, you engage in apologetics and all these sort of defensive measures to stop, when you get in a conversation, you're only supposed to get into conversations that you kind of have a roadmap for,
Who says
whether you're
this? But that's such a,
no,
I don't believe you're saying that, but I know you're exactly right. But that's what people think. That's such
because they're trying to protect this belief, because the belief saves me.
Right. That's such a position of fear and fragility, dare I use the word.
Well, the thing is like, so we would have.
And you're exactly right, because they have to maintain this psychological state, because if they lose that psychological state, because that's what saves them, is that psychological state. Now, I hate to play this card, but there's, in a sense, part of the Calvinist Arminian conversation, because part of what the Calvinists said is that state doesn't save you.
Yeah.
It's Jesus that saves you, not that state.
Yep.
Because, and you're exactly right, because once that state saves you, well, now
you're in all kinds of trouble.
You're in all kinds of trouble. And at least the Calvinist position, which I believe is the historic position of the church, you'll find, and I don't want to get too far down that road, but the idea is that finally and fundamentally, the thesis statement of the book of Jonah, salvation belongs to the Lord. Mm-hmm. Finally, it is, I am saved by Christ through faith. This is not a work by myself, lest any man should boast. Gosh, I wish someone had written that down maybe 2,000 years ago. Who would know? But this is the idea. Now, the question then that comes up, which is that the Arminians, well, what about agency? And I think there's a reason that the Calvinist-Arminian feud happened at a particular point in the philosophical development of Europe and deism, but that's all for other videos. But you're exactly right. Once this psychological state is the thing that saves you, now suddenly you have to build up a wall, and this is what we have to preserve. So don't let the kids lose that. But the thing is, just as you demonstrated in your own, you can't look at someone and say, they got that going. So you read the signs in their life and say, well, are they still going to church every week? But the thing is, well, you can go to church every week, and if you're a fairly conscientious person, and you've got enough familial pressure, you'll maintain that. Yep. But what's been happening in the church over the last 7,500 years is all of those pressure mechanisms that small, often ethnic communities like the Christian Reformed Church could reliably maintain, that's been broken down. And so, and in fact, denominations like my own, they took down the walls after World War II. And they tried to put up new walls. Now we're going to put it around the evangelicals, now the Bible-believing churches. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the goal was to keep this thing going, and because if you lose this thing, oh, now we're lost. But again, back to my tradition, this doesn't save you.
Right. Well, I think people, like, if I talk to them about it, they're like, oh yeah, I know that, but they act like it does. And so you're stuck in this, because like, so, this is, 20 years ago when this happened, but I can't imagine that it's so foreign today, but you would get training from some sort of evangelist expert would come in and talk to you and teach you how to do like street evangelism or whatever. And the idea is that you would have enough audibles that you could push it to your end goal. You always knew the end goal, and then you knew how to do these paths. So if they brought up this, you could do that. And they were always like very extroverted, very charismatic. They had, just
good looking, like, helps.
They're probably some of these guys were not good looking, but then they'd also have this like database of just like memorized arguments, and this is where like why I mentioned apologetics is because they would have all the lines of the apologetics, like they would quote C.S. Lewis and all this stuff to be able to steer this toward their end goal. And this is not what's happening in the estuary. The estuary is, or Vervaeke talks about it really good. When he talks about dialogos, we're engaged in a process where something's going to happen, and we basically trust the process. And as a Christian, I know that this is Christ that is enabling this process to happen. Whether you're coming down or going up or sense making or deconstruction, Christ is running the whole hierarchy. But so the space is actually a space to think. And because Sam brought up the group Don't Mom Alone.
Yeah.
I was like, well, what? Maybe this is like Don't Think Alone. So like, so like it's basically a space to engage in this process, but that's entirely different than this evangelical kind of maze that you're trying to run everything towards a known endpoint. And yeah, I just wonder what you think about that.
Well, I think that's right. And the evangelical known endpoint is not what everyone imagines it to be. Now, everyone has a known endpoint. You can't navigate with one implicit, at least in your mind. But over time and through cultures, and this gets into the culture missiological thing too, we're not going to see another St. Augustine because we don't have someone living in Hippo at the beginning of the 5th century again. And when we become like Christ, it doesn't mean we're not like a 21st century North American. Mm-hmm. I love, this has been really helpful because I think, you've helped me see a bunch of things in evangelicalism.
Well, it's terrible.
No, it isn't. Kidding. No, that's right. And it isn't because, and this is something that, because gosh, I have met when there are horrible people in churches. Yeah, but there are some gems there too. And there's some gems outside the church. I've met real gems outside the church, but in terms of, I believe in the power of church to help people live transformed lives. I am by no means a skeptic of the church. In fact, I'm probably, people will complain about my optimism for too many different kinds of churches to make improvements in people's lives, because then we play these little tribal games with our tiny little denominations and things. But I'm just going to go back to where you're at. I think you formulated it well, and you're right that, if the goal, and again, now we have these little other goals that have crept into Christianity and the church in our context. The goal is to keep the thing going. The goal is to, okay, well, what is this thing? Well, this is, we can't, since we can't look in their heads, are you doing your daily quiet time? Yes. Are you attending church regularly? Yes. Do you have a small group? Yes. Are you committing adultery? No. Are you tithing into the church? Yes. And so we have all this little checklist, and but then something happens, and we got to get back to this. And so then what churches become are these. I had one good friend of mine once say, well, the job of the church is to deploy an experience, to basically, didn't use these words, but to basically deploy a reproducible experience. And it is just exactly this. So we're going to have the praise and worship, and that's going to, the music's going to be great. And so I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into that space where I'm loving Jesus and I'm believing everything and I'm feeling it. And the music is there, and we've got thousands of people with me. And hey, I love that space as much as everybody. If I'm feeling down, boy, I put on the music and I get into that space. And it's like, I love that space, but this space does not save me.
Right.
And the reason I know that is
Yeah.
because what happens when I lose my marbles? When I get to be 80 years old and dementia kicks in and I can't remember where I put my keys. And I can't generate the space anymore. Well, now I've lost my salvation. No.
Right.
And we know this. We know this. So let's stop playing this game. And
Okay, so can the estu? All right, so for the people that have this going on, the estuary is going to be a deconstructive experience for them because they're going to try to maintain this.
Yes.
And
that's why, and in a lot of ways, if this is working for people, I'm not going to bother them.
Yeah, let them be, whatever.
I'm not going to bother them. I mean, they're following the Lord. They're faithful to the church. Yeah. They've got joy in their faith. I'm not going to bother them. But I see everybody else walking out saying, I can't do this anymore.
Or it starts to get a little wobbly and you're like,
that's right.
It's off balance. And like,
that's right.
I need to balance this up. I can't balance it up. You're like, no, you got to let it go.
Or they just get lost in this all the time. And it's like a drug. And I don't, they don't do anything else in terms of their faith. And they're a horrible human being, but they're sure doing this. And it's like, man, now I won't use other words for that, but, and so the Christian life is, there's this in the Christian life. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful, but we all go down the hole sometime and you can't, and I love how your story in many ways relates this so much because, I should pull that book. It was by Jim Scop, is a retired professor of English at Dordt College in Iowa, and he wrote a tiny little biography of Mother Teresa. It's just a little book. And he asked me, I've only done blurbs for 2 or 3 books in the world. So this is one of the few books I've done a blurb for. And the core of his biography of Mother Teresa is that she didn't have any of this. Mm. She thought God had abandoned her. She thought, if she had gone to a good psychologist, he would say, well, we're going to get you on some drugs because
you're depressed.
You're depressed. And so what does she do when she's depressed? She goes to one of the poorest places in the world and helps the bottom rung of people. And I probably deeply psychologically somewhere that made her feel better because she's like, if I think I have it bad, look at this schmo. His family's abandoned them and he's dying on the street. And the best we can hope for is to put him under someplace and give him food and water until he expires. Right. I mean, you got to be pretty low to have that be the only thing lower. And that makes you feel good. But she didn't have any of this. Yeah. And yet she was faithful and endured and, and say, hey, so the Christian life isn't this. When you got this, praise God for it. Just like money. When you got money, be thankful to God for it and be generous with your money. That's the point because love is what's at the center here. Love is what's at the center here. And so, no, I'm not gonna bother people who are not falling into the pit, And I think Jesus, it's the sick who need the doctor. And so what does Jesus go, who does Jesus talk to? In some ways, he leaves the people alone who are, okay, they're happy in their little program against Rome. They're off in the desert in some hole. Bless you. But Jesus looks around and says, no, it's the people who have fallen in the hole. I'm going to go to them. And the truth is, again, as a pastor, it's actually quite efficient use of time because, you're going to talk all these other people out of it. No, you're not. But it comes, the story, as Peugeot said, the story comes to everyone. So we've already got more people than we can handle right now. So wait till the story comes to them and then step in and love them. And that, to me, if there's an estuary space, do that.